Well, I've got some coffee and a pretty feminine mug and a new tool to play with. That's how I like to start my mornings. Now this, my friends, is the DeWalt Tracksaw. Now if you're not familiar, to grossly simplify this, the Tracksaw is nothing more than a circular saw that's made to ride on this rail, this track. And this way you get nice, perfect straight cuts, really table saw quality cuts that you would never normally be able to get from a circular saw. The other thing that you have with it is this plunge action that allows you to start and stop cuts in the middle of a workpiece, so it's pretty handy. Now this particular saw is getting a lot of buzz, and I think part of the reason is, at least a large part of the reason, is because of the fact that it's the first real competitor for the Festool line of plunge saws. So a lot of people are watching it just to see what happens in the market, to see what, what changes take place as a result of this being out there. And as far as I'm concerned, competition is always good because competition breeds innovation, and it'll be interesting to see what sort of retaliation maybe other tool companies have in mind to one-up this product, and in the end, the consumer gains. Now before we go any further, I just want to say that my associations with any other tool companies will have absolutely no effect, no bearing, and no influence on my ability to review this tool accurately and fairly. Now, although that was a joke, this does bring me to my favorite part of every product review video that I do, and that's my little disclaimer. As always, I'm not a reviewer. I just want to pass on my impressions of a product so that you can make an informed decision when you have to decide which tool you want to buy. Now today my goal really is to just take a look at the DeWalt unit, set it up. It's right out of the box. I haven't touched anything. Get it ready to make some cuts. We'll make a few sample cuts with it, and I'll give my impressions of it as I go. Now, as a full disclosure, Festool is a sponsor of the show. I've been using a TS55, Festool's smaller plunge saw, for several years now. I bought it when I first started up my business, and it has been a great performer. So my perspective when I analyze this unit is going to be completely, as much as I would like to detach from that, in all fairness, I can't help it. I'm influenced by the fact that I've used this tool for the last few years. So something as simple as looking at the plunge action on this is going to be a little awkward to me. So I'm going to try and keep my opinion out of it and just try to show you that this is different and let you decide whether or not that makes a functional difference to you in the end. Now, the bottom line is there's a lot of details, there's a lot of numbers that you could go through in comparing these two. And you ask DeWalt, they'll give you 15 things that makes their saw better. Ask Festool, they're going to give you 15 things that makes their saw better. In reality, unless you're using these two saws side by side every single day, you're probably not going to notice those things. So for me, I really like to go in and notice the things that you are going to confront a lot. The setup, changing your blades, adjusting the bevel cut, how clean the cut is. Things like that might make a difference to you. So let's just jump right in and see what we can do in setting this up. Well, first things first, boring black and white manual. We'll look at that later. And here's a nice, looks like a quick reference manual that kind of just gives you a very fast rundown. But nice color pictures, that's the easiest thing for me to follow. And I'm pretty familiar with the concept, so I'm just going to go through this first and see how that works out. Now, the first thing we need to do, and this is really going to go with any type of a saw like this, you want to tighten up the tolerance here. You want to make sure, here that slop that's in there, we want to take that away. Now there are two dials that you turn to adjust that and get that slop out of there, but you don't want to go too tight because you still want to be able to move it back and forth. So typically these are hand tightened. In this case, it looks like they've got a little locking screw at the top. And you're going to need a screwdriver to loosen that. Okay, so I'm just going to turn it clockwise, which seems to be wrong. This one looks like it's got to go counterclockwise. Okay, it's not moving there, so tighten it. Let's do the back. This one does look clockwise. See how that goes. Okay, no play. It's tightened it up a little bit, but I always recommend waxing these rails and waxing the base of the saw itself. It'll help it slide a lot smoother. It's not too bad. Now I briefly want to take a look at the blade changing functionality on this. For me personally, it doesn't really make that much of a difference because I don't change blades that often. But if you're cutting different materials or you're just going through a lot of wood and you need to replace this blade a lot, that's something that might be of interest to you. So let me show you how it works. You just push this button back here, push that down, then plunge the saw all the way to its full plunge position and pull the arm around. That locks it in place. Okay, now at this point, you just get your onboard Allen wrench. Okay, and I push down on this little lock. It even has a little picture of a lock. That will lock, see, because the arbor just spins freely. Push this down, that locks it in place, and we're going to turn it clockwise. No, counterclockwise. Okay, and that loosens it. Okay, take that guy all the way out, and the blade should slide right out. There you go. Pretty nice looking blade. Not too bad. Okay, so let's put this back in, see how that works out. And of course, to lock it in place again, let's lock out the arbor. Turn it clockwise, nice and snug, and that's it. Now to disengage this locked position, I'm going to turn the lever back, bring everything back up, and we're still locked, so I have to push the trigger mechanism, the safety up, and pull the trigger, and now it's completely unlocked. Actually, all you need to do is do the little thumb safety, and that pops the lock button up. And now it's free to work as normal. And now, just for comparison purposes, I don't think I'd be doing this video much justice if I didn't show you how the Festool works. Basically, you pull this little fast fix lever down like that, plunge the saw, and now it actually locks in position, and the arbor is already automatically locked out when it's in this position. You would just, in the same exact way, loosen this bolt, take the blade off, put a new blade back on, tighten it up. When you're done, take the fast fix off, and you're rolling again. So definitely a lot easier on the Festool, but again, depends on how much you use this thing. For me, quick blade changes just don't make that much difference to me. Now the great thing about a saw like this is that kickback is very unlikely. You're riding on a guided track, you're cutting nice and straight. Furthermore, it has a riving knife on it. Okay, you see that in the back? And that works like your splitter on a table saw. Okay, same exact thing, or a riving knife on a table saw. Okay, so as you're cutting, there's very little likelihood that it's going to kick back, but what DeWalt's done here that's a little bit different than anything I've seen before is they have an extra feature. Okay, you just disengage this dial back here, just with your fingers. It's sort of spring-loaded. When you do that, okay, there's a little plastic doohickey back here that has a spring-loaded arm, and what that does is it physically stops the saw from being able to travel backwards. You could push forward like normal, but as soon as you try to come back, it's locked out. So what that really is an extra precaution against kickback. So that if somehow, even with a riving knife, somehow this thing decides to kick back at you, it's not going to go anywhere on this rail. So kind of a neat feature. Okay, just going to plug this guy into the vac. It looks like just about any standard vac will fit on here, and the Festool line fits perfectly. And we'll make our first cut. And remember, when you make this first cut, you are actually establishing the zero clearance line on these little rubber pads that are on the bottom. So this is actually a pretty critical cut. So I like to have the entire surface supported, and I'll go over the entire thing in one shot. It's also interesting to note that on the DeWalt guide rail, you can use both sides. You can flip the saw the other way, and there's another side that's usable. All right, let's give this a shot. Now on that first cut, there was a lot more dust than I would have expected, so my next cut, I'm going to do where the cutoff piece is actually on the right side of the blade. That first cut, the right side of the blade was left wide open and exposed, and that, in situations like that, it's nearly impossible to pull all of that dust up. So in this case, where the blade is surrounded by wood on both sides, it's a best case scenario for dust collection. I'm also going to make sure that the blade doesn't go as deep as it did before. I want it to go just deep enough so that it goes through the wood. So let's take a look at the depth adjustment here. Seems pretty straightforward. You just loosen this little knob and turn the dial up to wherever you want it to stop. Interesting difference to note here is the fact that this is, of course, in inches and all the Festool stuff is in millimeters. To tell you the truth, I never really use mine. I'm always cutting 3/4 inch ply, so once it's set, it's usually good enough, but having it here in inches is pretty convenient. So we'll go for just a little over 3/4 of an inch. Now before we look at the cut quality, I want to show you the plunge action on this. When I first saw this in use, being used to the Festool, which is really just a single pivot point, okay, the Festool comes in like this, which is very easy to do with one hand. You could do it with two hands. Okay, my concern with this design was the fact that the plunge motion actually has a little bit of a forward action in it as well as down. So my fear was because of the way it pivots, or the fact that it doesn't pivot from a single point, the whole thing is going down. It made me feel like I might be actually pushing forward as I'm trying to push down, which when you're trying to plunge in a very specific position, that can be bad. So I'm actually pleased with what I've seen so far with these first few cuts because it's not moving forward like I thought it would. So as I push down and push forward, two hands, this is a no-brainer. It works very well. I don't really feel any inclination to push forward. One-handed is taking some getting used to. Now this could certainly be, the fact that I've been using this other stuff for years and now I'm trying something different. But initially, it's not a very natural motion for my hand. When I was trying it at first, I found that I was pushing more with my thumb, because that's what I do on the other unit. But what you have to do is actually push more with the base of your hand, which makes it go down as well as forward. And that gives you the motion you need to plunge properly. If you're pushing just with the front, with your thumb, and you're leading that way, you're just going to push the saw. Two hands, again, no-brainer. It's very well balanced. So something to think about, very different action, but once it's plunged, it's operating the same way. Now the cut quality here, this is really good. We have some Baltic birch ply. There's a lot of plies in here. We went cross grain to that top veneer layer, and this is a really nice clean cut. Limited, if any, tear out at all along the edge. Now the off cut is where we can make a distinction here. The off cut does have a little bit of tear out, and it's very, very minor. I mean, this is being picky at this point, but it does have a little bit. Now, if you're in a situation where you need to absolutely conserve every bit of material and your offcuts are just as important as the cut that your tool is on, you want to make sure that you have protection on both sides of that blade. Now, unfortunately, the DeWalt unit doesn't seem to have a splinter guard that you could put on this side of the blade. I do know that the Festool does have that feature, so that's kind of a plus. Now I'm going to make the same cut using a Festool just out of curiosity. I would love to see a side-by-side comparison of the two cut qualities just to see if I can notice anything. Okay, now this is very interesting. The cut from the Festool on this side, and there is no splinter guard installed on that unit, so I'm comparing apples to apples here. The blade side of the cut is actually cleaner. I mean, it's perfect. It's as perfect as I can imagine a blade cross-cutting a piece of plywood. The DeWalt was fantastic. It was a good edge. But the Festool actually looks a little bit tighter. It looks a little bit cleaner. But the offcut side on the DeWalt has less tear out than the offcut side of the Festool, if that makes any sense. Now the good thing about the Festool is you can install that splinter guard to get rid of that extra and probably make it just as good as the quality of the cut on this side of the blade. But right out of the box, no extra blade guards. It's very interesting. The Festool has the cleaner cut on the left-hand side. The DeWalt has the cleaner cut on the offcut. So take that for what it's worth. So now I just want to take a look at some of the beveling features. That's something that I always found unique about these Tracksaw systems and how you cut bevels, and it's fundamentally different than any other circular saw. Normally, on a circular saw, you change your bevel angle, and all of a sudden you actually change the point of attack of the blade. So you can't, hypothetically, let's say, make a straight cut, then adjust to 45 degrees and make a cut on that same line, because the blade actually moves to a different position. I know for a fact on the Festool, as you turn it to 45 degrees, you don't even have to move your straight edge. You'll cut right at that top corner edge and cut your 45-degree angle. So I just want to see how this one works in that same scenario. First of all, you got a little wing nut dealing at the front here and one in the back, pretty standard. Tilted to 45. We got a red line here that tells us where we are now. The good thing is it goes beyond 45 degrees. It goes up to 47. The only negative that I see here is that there is no positive stop, or at least there doesn't seem to be a positive stop at 45. You could just go all the way to 47. And the little plastic pointer here is not real exact. It's pretty rough, but we're talking a circular saw here, so I don't know how much crap you want to give it for something like that, but it's a pretty rough adjustment, relatively rough adjustment. So I'm at what looks like 45 degrees, and I'm going to lock it down here. Now when I take a close look at this edge, the important thing to notice is that the zero clearance strip is right on the edge of that cut, which means just because we tilted to 45 degrees doesn't mean we're going to mess up the rubber guide here, which really comes in handy. If it did that, if it messed it up every time, kind of like going 45 on your table saw, that would kind of be a bummer. So this works as it should. The cut is relatively clean. There's a little bit of tear out or lift on there, and really this is something that would sand away. You know, it's being a little bit nitpicky at this point, but still a really good cut. Okay, and for comparison purposes, let's go back to the Festool. Go to 45. It's not loose all the way. Okay, this one does have a positive stop at 45, so you're pretty confident when you get there. And now I've got the cutoff from the DeWalt here. It's pretty smooth too. You know, on overall smoothness of cut though, at least on this cut, and a lot of this could be user influence in terms of how fast I move across the workpiece. As far as the smoothness of the cut, I'm going to have to give the edge to Festool on this one. Their cut is a little bit smoother. All right, so what's the verdict? Well, you tell me. The bottom line is these are two killer saws. Both designs are very good. This one clearly is heavily influenced by the Festool design, and I think they did a pretty good job of copying it. There's a few things that are different, but for the most part, you are going to be really hard pressed to notice a in the shop, in your face, very obvious difference between the performance of this saw and the performance of one of the Festool saws. So I don't really think it's something to stress out about if you're in the market for one of these, because the bottom line is either one is going to be light years better than what you were probably using before if you were just doing your own sort of straight edge with a circular saw kind of setup. So, I mean, I got to give them both a thumbs up. Now, there may be little tiny details here and there, and I'm going to give you links to a few blog posts and forum posts that I've found that give a very detailed comparison of the two units. But for me, it comes down to more big picture things. And if I were in the position of having to choose which one would I buy, that's probably where I would take it. I would start to think about the big picture. And what I mean by that is if you are buying this saw and the straight edge, and that's really all you're interested in getting, you're not interested in building sort of a system that all works together, you know, there's nothing wrong with getting the DeWalt at all. But if you are the type of person who wants to build up a system that works in unison, so let's say you plan on buying the Festool jigsaw, or you plan on buying one of their routers or their vac or their multi-function table, which, by the way, is a critical component to utilizing and getting the most out of one of these saws. If you plan on going that route, now you got something to think about, because they play well together. They all take the same plug, they all hook up nicely to the vac system, and it's a family of products. Now, this is the only product, at least that I know of so far, that DeWalt has that works with the track. I'm sure they'll come up with other things as time goes on, but as it stands right now, there isn't sort of this overriding umbrella family of products approach that all just works well together. So, you know, that's a compelling thing, I think, if you're trying to build your shop up. So, like I said, it's a bigger picture concept because the performance on both of these is great, but that may be what this comes down to. You know, if you can't really pick apart their performance specs, more than that, you may have no choice but to say, okay, which one just in the long run makes the most sense? So, you know, take a look at them both, look at the links that I'm gonna post with this video, and just make a decision for yourself. Two great saws. Honestly, I don't think you can go wrong either way. They're both awesome products, really, really cool products, and will really change the way that you handle sheet goods in your workshop. So check them both out.